Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'd like to start off this video with the disclaimer that everything I say in this video is my opinion and is based on my experience. If there is going to be anything of fact I discuss, I'm going to show it to you specifically. So in the wake of my healer comparison video, I decided to do a little bit of a deeper dive and analysis into one spec that several people seemed to think I devalued or cast dispersions on. While this was not my intent, I realized that my comments might have made more sense if I did a video on each of the healers before doing my overall comparison. I'm going to try and correct that now. The spec, of course, I'm referring to is the Discipline Priest. So let's start off by going into some of their abilities. We'll start off with Desperate Prayer. Desperate Prayer is now baseline. It increases maximum health by 25% for 10 seconds, and it instantly heals you for that amount. Next up is Dispel Magic. It dispels, basically does the same thing that it does. It removes a magical, one magical effect. Fade is pretty much the same thing. It's going to reduce threat. Holy Nova is a little bit different. While it used to just cause damage before, it's now going back to one of the iterations it had where it was actually healing. It'll heals not that much, but the damage it does is also affected by Atonement. So not too bad of a spell there. Not super big, but it's an extra thing to do. Next is Leap of Faith, which is pretty much the same. Levitate, pretty much the same. Mass Dispel, Mass Res, Mind Control, Mind Vision. Not really any big changes there. Pain Suppression is a damage reduction, 40% damage reduction on an 8-second cooldown. It lasts for 8 seconds, and it's on a 3-minute cooldown. Excuse me. It reduces. This is your big damage reduction ability cooldown. It's on a 3-minute cooldown. It's not terribly long, but it's not so much you're going to be using it every pull. But again, it's not so long that you're only going to use it once per, like, say, a dungeon, right? Next up is Penance. Penance is a healing and damaging spell. It's affected by Atonement. It's on a 9-second cooldown. It does obviously it does more heals than damage. I'm going to go a little bit more into this later when I start talking about talents, but yeah, it's another one of the abilities you have at your disposal. Powered Barrier is your other big cooldown. It's on a 3-minute cooldown. It summons a holy barrier to protect all allies at the target location for 10 seconds, reducing all damage taken by 25%, preventing damage from delaying spell casting. So pretty good. Cooldown's not too bad. So yeah, pretty good utility type of spell, damage reduction kind of thing. Next up is Power Word Fortitude, which of course is your buff, 10% stamina for 1 hour to all raid or party members. Next up is your AoE ability. Now, I had taken notes on this before. This ability was not as powerful as it is currently, as you're seeing on the screen. Previously, it had done significantly less healing, and which kind of led to the belief that this was an ability mainly used to apply Atonement to multiple targets at one time. That being said, right now it does 4,394 healing and applies atonements for 60% of normal duration. It's on a charge system with 2 charges and an 18-second recharge. So a little bit better. I think Blizzard, like I said, there's been lots of changes this last week. As you've probably seen in some of the other videos and just videos in general, is that even though Blizzard said, everything is pretty much done and we're just doing little tweaks here and there, there's been huge changes in the last week. So this has been buffed. It does a little bit more heals. So I think it's probably to help out with AoE heals, which there's not really a whole lot of them for the Discipline Priest. Next spell is pretty much the core, what you think of when you think of a Discipline Priest. It's Power Word Shield. Shield's an ally for 15 seconds, absorbing 2577 damage and preventing damage from delaying spell casting. This also applies Atonement. It doesn't say it in the tooltip, but it applies Atonement, and it's not like the Power Word Shield of the past where it would prevent large amounts of damage, but also Plea has been replaced, and this has basically got Plea baked into it. It's a quick way of applying Atonement to a target. Next is Psychic Scream, which is pretty much the same. Purge the Wicked's a talent, but it replaces your Shadow Word Pain. It's a dot. It does a little bit of initial damage and then does more damage over time. Yeah, it's another ability to keep up on your targets while you're going. It's affected by Atonement. Purify is pretty much what it's always been. No real big changes there. Rapture is a little considerably different, I would say. It used to be that it would take the cooldown off of your power word shield, but now since you don't have that anyway, instead for 10 seconds your power word shield absorbs an additional 200% amount, 200%, and it's on a 1.5-minute cooldown. Pretty good, a little bit of extra utility there. Make your shields heal for a little bit more. So a resurrection, pretty much the same. Shackle Undead, same thing. Shadow Mend is a little bit of a trickier spell. It basically, this is your main single cast healing spell, and it's kind of a little bit different than most casted spells that heal. It has a price to it. It says it in the tooltip here. It says wraps an ally in shadow, which heals for 4,218, but at a price. Now that healing amount is a pretty good amount, but the price is where it comes into play. The ally will take 211 damage every 1 second until they have taken 2,109 total damage from all sources or leave combat. So effectively, it's only half as effective as it normally does. If you see here, I'll cast it on myself, and you can't see it. I'll do it again. You can look up here on the top. It's healing for about 5,000. That's because I have Atonement on me, but that's pretty good. But that amount that it heals, it's still going to be a percentage that you're taking in dot damage. So I'm not in combat or anything, so you're not seeing anything on there. But yeah, if you're in combat and your damage is low, I'm going to go to this dummy so you can get the effect of this. But he's sitting there whacking on me. My health is low. I'm in combat. I'm going to back away from him so I don't die. But look at that, 4,218. I'm taking that damage. If you look into my combat log, you can see that I got an 11,000 crit, but then the healing I'm getting from it is kind of negated. So look how much it's hitting me for. The higher I heal, the more it hits me for. So it's tricky. Now, if you're outside of combat and you've left combat and you're just trying to top everyone up, it could be pretty effective. But yeah, a little bit of a double-edged sword. Next up is Shadow Fiend. Shadow Fiend summons a Shadowy Fiend to attack the target for 15 seconds. This is affected by, it doesn't really say how much it attacks for, but it does a pretty decent amount. It's affected by your Atonement. I'll let you have a look at this right here. Let me get this out of the way for a quick second. But I'll apply my Atonement. I'll send him out to the target. You can see he's getting me for pretty good 742 per attack. I'm getting healed by it through Atonement. I'm gonna keep my Atonement rolling on me. So it's pretty good. It'll crit for a good amount. He's hitting pretty well. He lasts for 15 seconds. It's burst healing. If you've got Atonement on a lot of people, it's gonna work pretty well. But yeah, let's go back to it. What do we got next? Smite's your it's your filler. It's gonna do holy damage. It's got a pretty fast cast time. It also absorbs some of the damage that an enemy deals. Preventing damage is pretty much the niche of the Disciplined Priest. So yeah, it's your filler spell. Now, Atonement is how you heal. Atonement, basically your Power Word Shield, Shadow Mend, and Power Word Radiance apply Atonement to your target for 15 seconds. That should have the caveat there that Power Word Radiance only does it for 60%, which is like 9 seconds, 10 seconds, something like that. But your spell damage heals all targets for 55% of the amount of the damage done. So whatever the tooltip is on your Smite or whatever, 55% of that will be transferred into heals to all targets affected by Atonement. Focused Will is a passive that basically gives you damage reduction if you're struck in melee. It stacks up to 2 times, 15% for 8 seconds. Your Mastery is that your healing and absorption is increased by 34.5% on targets with Atonement. So if you've got Atonement and then you are needing that heal, that's why when I casted that Shadow Mend, it healed for more than the tooltip. It's because of my Mastery goes into play on that. So if I were to say conversely, put up my not that. Let me turn back around here. If I put on, say, my bubble, and then say I'm attacking a target. I don't want to attack the target. I wanted to cast that on myself, but I'll keep my Atonement rolling on me. That cooldown's relatively quick on that. So I've targeted myself. I have Atonement rolling, and now I'm going to Penance myself. The Penance will heal me for more. So Mastery is pretty good, has a good interplay with your healing. Last one's Power of the Dark Side. This is one that's going to be good tracked with a weak aura or something like that. Purge the Wicked has a chance to empower your next penance to do 50%, increasing its effectiveness by 50%. So that's a pretty good deal. It's something to look out for when you're when you're needing that big heal from penance. But let's go into the talents. So, ooh, that's not the right button. Let me try that again. So the first row, the first row, I think Castigation is probably going to be your go-to. Schism can have, change your play style, and it does have some interplay. It could be fun, but I think Castigation is probably going to have the most benefit both to your DPS and your heals because it adds an extra bolt of Holy Light for penance. Twist of Fate I don't like because it basically gives you a buff after you heal someone who's below 35% health. You generally shouldn't let people get below 35% health because Disc doesn't have a lot of tools at its disposal to quickly and easily get them up past 35% or up out of the danger zone relatively easy. Next row, speed increases. This is not really anything worth talking about. The 45 row is going to be your mana regen. There's a lot of math involved, but probably Mindbender is when you need mana back quickly. Powerwood Solace is going to give you be part of your rotation, and it could basically equal out to the same. I don't know how the DPS goes, but it gives you 1% with the use, and it's on 11-second cooldown. 60 talents, CC, not really important. The 75 level, though, is kind of interesting. So your Sins of the Many is going to be like a situational ability. Increases your damage by up to 12%, diminishing for each ally affected by your atonement. So if you're in a 5-man and you have atonement on everyone, you're going to get a 7% damage increase, which is not bad, but generally you're going to want to be healing with atonement, and the more atonements you have, the less your damage is increased. So if you're in a really good group where you can just mainly focus on your tank and occasionally heal other people, you're going to be this is going to give you more effectiveness to the group in the form of more damage to you. That being said, I think Contrition is going to be your go-to because this basically turns your penance into an AoE ability. So when you heal with penance, everyone with your atonement is healed for 281, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you can heal people. Your main target's going to get more heals from it, and you're going to be able to heal other people at the same time. So you can kind of give you more of a sense of an AoE heal. Shadow Covenant's very tricky, much in the same way that Shadow Mend is. It draws on Power of the Shadow to heal the target and 4 injured allies within 30 yards for a good amount, but leaves a shell on them that absorbs about half that amount in healing within 6 seconds. So this is good if you're going to have if you have like a burst damage window where you're going to have to heal everyone up. They're not going to be taking consistently taking damage over that time. So it could see some use in raids, but generally speaking, it's a little tricky, and I don't like the fact that it's going to absorb heals. It kind of takes away from the effectiveness of it if you're consistently taking damage, which is why I think Contrition is better. Next row is kind of also a little bit along the lines of AoE. You've got Purge the Wicked, which replaces Shadow Word Pain. It does a little bit more initial damage, and it does a little bit more damage over time, but the big element to this is that you can spread the dot by using penance on the target. So if you've got enemies within a close area kind of grouped up, you can dot one of them with Purge the Wicked, penance that same target, and now all of them will have Purge the Wicked on them. They'll all be having a ticking dot, which if you've got your atonement spread will equal to more trickle heals, kind of along the lines of like a Druid Hawk kind of situation going. Now Divine Star and Halo, they are going to have a little bit more healing component to them in the form of all at once, but the problem they have is that well, Halo's going to do a little bit more, but it's on a longer cooldown. But Divine Star, you have to have your targets lined up right because it's going to go out in a straight path and then come back. And Halo just covers a really big area. And the problem with these abilities is that they do damage and they heal. And while they're both affected by Atonement, you also have the ability to pull extra mobs in a raid or a dungeon, which might devalue those a little bit, might not make them seem as attractive. But moving on to the last row is a bunch of different talents that are kind of they're for varying different skill levels and varying situations. Lenience is going to be your easy no-brainer type of one. Your Atonement reduces damage by 3%. This is easy. You don't have to really think about it, and you don't have to pay as much attention to it because it's passive. Luminous Barrier is going to be the situational one. It's going to be the one where if you're taking low damage, but everyone in the group is taking that damage, it's going to be helpful because it gives it an absorb shield. It replaces your power word barrier, but now you get a shield over everyone, even if they're not grouped up, and it'll absorb 4,686 damage on each of them for 10 seconds. But if you're taking large amounts of damage over a little bit longer period of time, say something along the lines of, I don't know, 10 seconds, you're going to be taking more than that 4,000, however many, 686 damage, then you're going to be better off having your power word barrier. You don't have the flexibility to not have everybody in one area, but it's going to be more powerful just to move them all into that area if it's going to be bigger sustained damage, because 25% damage reduction across a larger damage is going to mean more damage is going to get reduced. But like I said, situational. Now, evangelism is probably going to be for your higher end, higher skilled players who are doing your min-maxing. It's on a 1.3 minute cooldown, extends the duration of all your active atonements. So you get in a situation with someone who really knows a fight, knows the mechanics, knows when heavy damage is going to come in. They can time it just right. They can spread all their atonements. They can extend them and just go wild and make those heals from atonement come in really quickly by doing what they're doing with atonement. But again, higher skill cap, you've got to be, this is probably going to be very more effective for your higher skilled player. But with that, let's go and see what I have discovered in some raids. Well, not raids, what I've seen in some dungeons that I've run so far. All right, so I ran a number of dungeons, and when I say a number, I want to say I ran in the vicinity of 7 to 10 dungeons. In a good group where the DPS assists the tank and the tank knows what they're doing, disc is easy and fun. In bad groups where DPS attack whatever they want, the tank struggles to keep aggro and manage their cooldowns, people will die. The skill cap is high and the margin for error is low. It's more stressful and can be challenging but doable. In worse situations, it can be way more stressful and not fun at all. In a good group, kind of like the one you're probably seeing right now, I can rely on Atonement and Power Word Shield and be good. If everyone's taking a lot of damage, this doesn't have like rescue AoE. The closest thing I have is to shield everyone and then penance the person who's taking the most damage. I can also utilize some of my cooldowns if I need to be, and they're on a relatively short their cooldown is relatively short, but the problem you don't want to run into is that not having it when you really need it if you're overusing it. So like I said, high skill cap, the closest thing is to shield everyone, like I said, and penance with the contrition talent, and penance the person taking the most damage. This works well as AoE, but if it's not executed correctly, the results could be someone dying. So disc cooldowns feel like they're like mandatory as part of the rotation, but like I said, you have to be real careful with it because you don't want to need the cooldown and not have it. So I want to talk a little bit more about Shadowmend. So if Shadowmend has to be spammed in a group in combat, it loses a good deal of its effectiveness. It's not what you want to have to rely on as your healing spell, because it does heal for a good amount initially, but that amount's going to dwindle, and if your group's already taking lots of damage, it's not going to be as effective. Essentially, it only heals for about half as much as the tooltip says, kind of like I said before, because the person will basically lose that health over 10 seconds. It's a stagger heal. It's very much like the stagger of a reverse stagger of the Brewmaster. It's most effective, I found, when topping everyone off combat. So that's kind of what I found. I want to just go into a little bit more about my general opinions on the spec. I'm going to say this right off, and I know it probably goes without saying, but it's a higher skill cap. There's definitely a higher skill cap. You have to be able to pay attention to a lot more things. You are there's the expectation of DPS. So if you play disc and you're not DPSing, you're obviously one doing something wrong. And if your DPS isn't good, people may wonder why, how you're able to heal. And if you're healing more without using atonement, you're going to be out of mana. I can tell you that for a fact too. Mana is not as bad on its. If you're not using atonement, it's real easy to run out of mana. So in a situation where everyone is just not doing what they're supposed to do and chaos is ensuing, a disc is going to feel frantic. You don't feel like you have a lot of tools at your disposal to heal up everyone quickly. I mean, this isn't to say that there's not a way to keep people from dying, but you're going to excel more in a more coordinated group effort. In a looking for dungeon shit show that I've been dealing with in the beta, and it continues to get worse as more and more people get it, which tells me that when these things go live, it's probably going to be pretty bad. It makes me not want to heal or tank when I get in these groups where people are just, they expect the same thing in Legion, where tank threat's not an issue and people can pretty much attack whatever they want and healers can deal with it and tanks can deal with it. That's really not the case. So I think before, another thing I wanted to address is that in my previous video, I didn't give Disc Priest utility a lot of maybe the necessary credence that people thought it should have been given. And this was really opinion based for me. I ranked Holy a little bit higher because to me, I'm thinking from healer perspective and not so much. So I'm thinking of utility to the healing and the group, the effectiveness of it, I guess you could say, and the singularity that specific spec can bring that specific utility. So, and this was a thing with the shamans as well, that a lot of the things shamans could do, other people, other classes, other like DPS and stuff can do. Interrupts, stuns, CC, those are all things that could be done by melee, which is why, even though I do say, and it is pretty well known that shaman are known for their utility, I didn't necessarily rank them as high because I'm thinking healer utility, and healer has to have something that's their utility that's unique to their spec as a healer and not something that can be necessarily easily reproduced by another class. Like heroism or bloodlust is something that can be done by drums. It can be done by a hunter pet. It can be done by a mage. So if you have those other people in your group already, what's going to make you decide this class over another one? So that was kind of it. The value I gave to some of the abilities that a disc priest could do. The rapture is a little bit more singular. It's for the shields. It's gonna make them. It's on a relatively short cooldown, so it's good. It's not super great. It's not game changing, but it's good. And likewise, pain suppression. It's a big damage reduction. It's on a fairly short cooldown. Lots of other classes don't necessarily have that. That's good too, but a 40% damage reduction is not. It's big, and if you don't have other healers like in a raid group, it can make a difference in a 5-man or a mythic plus, but it's not going to make as much of a difference in a raid situation where lots of other classes have damage reductions and lots of other classes have big rescue heal type abilities that can, kind of counter that to a certain extent. This is not to say that it's not valuable, because it's definitely good. And if you don't have those other healing classes, like if say you have 2 or 3 disc priests or 2 disc priests, I don't think you would do 3, but say you have 2 disc priests and a holy priest, and maybe you even have a resto druid, then those things are going to be a lot more powerful. They're going to be a lot more valuable, and the value of that utility is going to be a bigger deal. Power word barrier is also a very big thing with utility too, and I think that I probably didn't give it the weight that a lot of people thought I should do, but that's just my opinion. It's not a fact, and it's not to say that they don't have any utility at all, because pretty much every class has some kind of utility. And I would say as far as healers go, I'm pretty sure I said this in my video before, but monks have pretty much the least amount of utility out of any of the healing specs. But the thing is that what a spec lacks in one area, they'll make up for in other areas. And I think Disc Priest does that. The main thing about Disc Priest is that it is not the same kind of healer as other healers. It doesn't just heal by casting spells or putting hots on things. You've got to do damage. You've got more stuff to keep track of. It's a higher skill cap. Your DPSing is part of your healing. That is something unique and different and definitely makes the spec worthwhile. I'd like to wrap this video up by saying that if anyone felt as if I was attacking their favorite spec or somehow encouraging others not to play it when I made my initial healer comparison video, I apologize. This was not my intent. Disc is fun and different and a really good healing spec for healers who are ready for a bigger challenge. That being said, I don't really feel as if anything I said in my comparison video is necessarily wrong. When it comes to single target, Disc is limited by having one direct cast heal spell and one channeled ability with a short cooldown. Limited, not incapable, just limited, especially when your main heal spell has a dot element to it, at least while you're in combat. You're going to have to take more damage that's not going to be able to be necessarily included in that original heal. Also, their AoE is, I do agree, still is limited as well, but I think recent changes to Power Word Radiance, they've closed the gap a little bit on that. It's definitely gotten a buff in the amount that it heals. Also, I think if you talent right with Contrition, the gap is closed a little bit more. But again, this doesn't have an ability that can readily and easily AoE heal without a cooldown or without some setup. This can prove to be fatal if you're in a group that's taking a lot of damage all at once, like looking for dungeon. I'm going to harp on that because I have the worst luck in that damn thing. But anyway, as for utility, I think I could have explained it a little better. I think I rushed through and I didn't explain my reasoning as well as I could. I completely skipped over pain suppression, which is definite utility, but I don't think I would give it the value of something like reincarnation or symbol of hope. And again, that's just my own personal opinion. Well, that's going to do it for me. I'd just like to say a big thank you to all my new subscribers. If you think there's anything I missed or you have anything to add, please feel free to leave a comment below. I love a good discussion. I'm a pretty open-minded person who's more than willing to discuss differing points of view so long as no one resorts to personal attacks. If you liked this video and or found it informative, hit that like button. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, hit the subscribe button like you'd like to hit a troll in the comments section. And I'll see you next time.